All right, let's call this meeting of the Urbana Civilian Review Board to order. Roll call, please.
Tom Costello,
Yeah, here.
Ricardo Diaz,
Here.
Scott Dossett, Diane Gottheil, James McNeely,
Here.
and Ivy Williams.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda?
The agenda, sorry.
Are you pretty eager to talk about those minutes, Diane? Is that where we're at here? Okay, I'm assuming there's no changes.
Hold on, I sent the other ones, I didn't see the agenda, so I proposed that in 3 or 4, at least we expand, well, actually, those were in my email, so I just wanted to expand. I'm not seeing the agenda, so are those proposals on, or? No. Okay.
No.
All right, so basically, I'm proposing that we discuss a little bit, that we had a little bit more documentation on what the city council, maybe the email was just made up in my head. I thought I'd sent it out.
Okay, then that is on the agenda.
Okay, that is on the
That's here.
agenda. And then a discussion on the recommendation at the city council meeting regarding adding the modification. Yes. Okay, so this is for the purchase, but adding or the residency requirement that got put on their agenda too.
Yeah, that's on there.
Okay,
That's part of the legislative update.
okay, thank you. Thank you.
Approval of the minutes. Diane, you have a comment?
Yes, because under old business TASER policy A1, it said that the TASER policy development subcommittee consisting of board members, Ricardo and Scott, but they weren't the only members, right? So should it be including,
Well, it was my understanding that they did
they were the only members of that subcommittee?
as that subcommittee, yes.
that work closely with them, but
Right.
then we all supported
Right,
them from
okay.
behind.
Yeah.
All right. So the TASER policy development, was a subcommittee of our board,
That's correct.
then I have nothing
Okay.
to suggest.
Anyone else have any other minutes issues? Can we call for the approval of the minutes, please?
So moved.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, staff report. Todd?
You got the report showing our current status in terms of the cases. Any questions?
Well, you're talking about what you've passed out to us?
No, just the status of cases.
Oh, the other status of cases. Anybody comment on those?
I do have a question. It's the same one I emailed. Is this every case that's before in the pipeline?
Yeah, that's every case where there's been a filing under the ordinance.
Okay.
Since, we've got them numbered here since the beginning of 2013.
Okay.
That's
That's as long
everyone
as I've
that's been filed, and that basically includes all notarized cases under the ordinance.
But see, it doesn't include the case that we actually considered in front of us because it's no longer pending.
It's no longer pending, but I'm not exactly sure that falls within the timeline. I'm trying to remember when we actually had that appeal, but we had one
Maybe it
in
was
2011, and then one, I think, towards the end of 2012, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So that wouldn't be on this particular timeline. I can print out a longer timeline if you'd
Yeah.
like.
No,
that
no. My
includes
concern
all.
is just one that it includes everything that's pending right now, and that's why I didn't know because I knew that was concluded, and I didn't see in the last column saying concluded cases. So that was my thing. So it includes everything since 13,
Right.
and then the other one, the last one on the list says that it was what is the word?
Founded.
Yes. So founded means that the chief of police agreed with the complainant?
Yes.
Okay, and they made some kind of agreement or
Essentially, they notify the complainant that they agreed, or that once they did the investigation, that they found it to be credible, and that they've taken remediative action to make sure that it doesn't happen again. That's about the extent to which the city can provide information in terms of information to the public about something that is ostensibly a personnel issue.
Right. So at this point then, again, dumb email, I guess I might not have sent it out. So I do want to see that case because I think for me anyway, it would be instructive to learn because we represent the public in that sense, and we are privy to that, to seeing that case,
Right,
right? So sign me up for looking at it more, just because I want to learn how it is that when we have something that is considered valid, how does it go and how do we communicate with the citizens? So.
Right. So as I sent this in an email before, if you want to just give Tony a call or give me a call and set up a time to come in, or you can come in basically during normal business hours and one of us will be available.
Okay. All right.
Is that all you have?
Yes.
Public participation? He rose from the dead.
Good evening. My name is Brian Dolliner. Okay, my name is Brian Dolliner. I live at 303 West Locust in Urbana and work with a group, CU Citizens for Peace and Justice in town. We have been one of the primary proponents for the Police Review Board. I wanted to express our concern over a couple issues. We spoke about this before City Council a few weeks ago. One, we continue to be opposed to tasers, and we don't believe it's under the purview of the Civilian Police Review Board to even have the authority to review taser incidents, let alone really investigate them, as the Review Board has no subpoena power, no really investigatory ability. Second is the residency requirement. This seems to sort of come out of nowhere and have really been there's been no discussion about it before it appeared before City Council a couple weeks ago. But we, in our research, have found that most of the local boards similar to this one have a residency requirement. So if you serve on the Unit 4 school board, you have to live in Champaign. And we believe this should also be the case for in Urbana, the Police Review Board. Certainly there are many qualified and interested local residents in Urbana, and our group would be more than happy to help find a replacement for any vacant seats in the future. So those are our two primary concerns for tonight. As well, I also want to express our interest that we will be filing a FOIA request for the information regarding the most recent complaint that was founded, that was just mentioned. Again, we just want to remind ourselves that information like the officer who the complaint was filed against is public information according to state ruling. We would like that to be available for the viewing audience out there tonight. I think people tune in to see what the Police Review Board is doing, and as I understand, this would be the first complaint filed that had been founded by the chief, and requires some further discussion tonight or in the future as to what those details really are. So I don't know if it's too preliminary at this stage, but we look forward to hearing about that case more, and thank you all for your good work.
Let me just, I assume that you made all of this known to the city council as well, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Anyone else? Old business. Whoops.
My name is Michael Hill. I live at 403 Briar Lane in Champaign, and I'm also a person who is on the CU Citizens for Justice. I've been doing that, been with them for off and on for like 2 to 3 years. And from some of the research the others have done, I'm totally against tasers. I don't know. And I'm also for having people on this board to live in the county that they're representing, to be on the board. I, for one, I like to say I'm against tasers. I think there should be a more a different way to to have someone to be arrested, or I'm just saying this in short because I'm not lost for words here. From our research, we see that it can cause more harm to a person. So that's all I have to say. And I like to mention that I'm here, just to get more information about what you all do, and also to listen in and see which way you're going to go with this, reviewing the tasers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, old business. Todd, do you want to kind of go through what we have in front of us, please?
Sure. So what I've distributed is the council packet item regarding the taser review process, and actually the authorization for the Urbana Police to purchase tasers. What you'll find in there are several references to basically the incorporation of the review process that has been discussed at the previous meetings. And what I wanted to do today is to provide this for everyone's review so that we can begin to construct administrative rules in compliance with the City Council's instruction through the ordinance. Basically, I think we've talked about this quite a bit, but just to remind everyone, the council has passed an ordinance that will call on the CPRB to review uses, and I use that very loosely. It's at the point at which it comes out of the holster, and also at the point at which it's actually fired, of tasers by Urbana officers. And what the ordinance does is it lays out the particulars of how the City Council expects that review process to take place.
Just by way of reminding folks and reminding myself, there's a video component to the taser use, is that correct?
Yes. At the point at which the tasers are activated, there's actually a camera on the taser that actually activates. And so it provides video.
So, and again, this is just to educate me. So once it's pulled from the holster, we have video, but we might not know what took place prior to that, unless, of course, the officer pulls it from the holster in order to record what's taking place prior to its deployment.
If I'm remembering correctly, and Scott and Ricardo, you can remind me, but I think the instruction basically was for the camera to be activated at the point at which it's pulled from the holster.
Yeah, right, and our intent in doing that was to try to provide this board and the community with as much information about the use of the device as we could. And so we have to remember, we started calling it use versus deployment. So deployment would be when the taser was actually fired at an individual as opposed to the use. Statistics that we see from Champaign County, for example, show that in terms of eliciting compliance, just first verbally notifying about the taser and then actually seeing it actually pull people into compliance that aren't. And so we thought it would be best to try to capture as much of that flow as we could. It doesn't make it a whole lot more complicated for the officer to actually use the taser to switch on the video recording. So,
Well, it gets switched on automatically by taking it on, or they have a setting. But for me, the part that makes a huge difference is, as you kind of asked, once it's taken out of the of the holster, it gets turned on, and that's when the camera turns on. But who knows what else has happened before that? So, you know, you have a loss unless there's another camera on. But the thing that was also big preoccupation was the officer should not be taking out the taser to scare people. That is, if they're going to take it out and they're going to display it, it's because they need it. It's not to start, you know, there's a little setting in which you can basically see the thing back and forth and say, you know, you better get your act together or something like that. That was something that we didn't want to do, or we didn't want to give them license to do. So if it's coming out of the out of the holster, it's because they have the intention of using it, whether they use it or not. That is, it looks like a situation, let's pull it out, you know, because it looks like we need it, but they can't be out there, you know, threatening in that sense. It looks like from reports from other logs in the area, the fact that it's pulled out, if somebody has already suffered a zap, people remember that zap, and they don't want to do it again. So there's a game here of, not game, there's a tension built up in that moment if you've already experienced it, and therefore we try to be sensitive to the fact that, you know, that's also a way of that could be misused by an officer. Anyway, it's tough.
Yeah, I have to ask you for a clarification there, Ricardo, because I don't believe that in any of the documentation we received from the chief or that I've read independently, there was any mention of people who had actually had a taser deployed on them before.
No, we don't know, and the officer probably wouldn't know.
Right.
But because there is a possibility, then playing with it, quote, by an officer would elicit a reaction from a person that was not necessarily positive for the communication to be the first solution. So anyway, that was built in.
And just to clarify the point, I wanted to make sure and confirm in the policy, the camera is activated at the point at which the safety is removed or is switched off. And so the instruction to the officer will be that as soon as it comes out of the holster, the safety is switched off, that therefore activating the camera.
And the police officer has no control over that, right? It automatically comes on, am I understanding that right?
It automatically comes on at the point of switching off the safety, but they will have to manually switch off the safety.
But they don't manually switch it on.
The camera or the
camera.
Yeah.
Right, it comes on with the safety automatically.
Okay.
So that's
Or
kind
it
of,
comes on with the deactivation of the
that's
safety
kind of a
automatically.
trade-off, because that means
Yes.
that for us, for the visual to be there, the safety has to be off, and we
Exactly,
don't
and that was a
necessarily want to
discussion.
encourage
Yeah.
that, yeah.
That was explicitly discussed during the
There was
policy
lots of
consideration.
discussion for that because
I mean, I could see it comes out and then someone complies and it's not needed anymore and the safety doesn't have to.
so there will be a record that it was taken out of the
Right.
holster, but that's all we have at that point.
With the safety off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a little risk built in to,
The thing that there is no risk for is that they would use it on somebody without us having a recording. Because the moment that in order to use it, they have to switch the safety off, which means now the thing is on and so is the camera, and we will have a record of, I'm sorry to put it so lightly because I know it looks terrifying, zapped. If somebody's going to get zapped, we're going to have a camera record. Am I?
I'm just concerned because the probability of them getting zapped is increased when the safety is off.
Yeah.
Right, well, that
Yeah,
was,
that's-
yeah,
that's the
and we
trade-off there.
recognize
Yeah,
that, yeah. You know, the body of the taser gives you the same trigger protection sort of modes that you're trained to use with a firearm. So in that context, it's not a whole lot different
Right, okay.
than how they would use a pistol. But yeah, there were concerns about this. We wanted to get as much information as we could for the community
Right.
about how these things are being used. So.
Todd, I have a question, and it's just maybe my previous understanding. Is there, have we made this, is this a pilot program, or is this, we're moving forward? Now, I know we limit the amount of officers that have it, we limit those with specific training, but is there a review that's required?
Yes, sir. So the ordinance actually writes in or it prescribes a 12-month review or a review after 12 months.
Okay. So this is something of a pilot program in and even of itself, even with the limited amount of people that we have,
Yes.
that they're going to have the available to them. Okay.
Yes.
And actually, that was a big discussion for us as to what do we put into it. Once they're bought, you know, the checkups on them. So we talked quite a bit about how soon do we want to review in order to know, because it could be that they buy them and they don't use them for a while. And so we needed to give a little bit of thing and then have a review. We also discussed the fact that that's the stipulated review. If somebody, this board or somebody else calls for a review, that it could happen before that too.
Sure.
You know, and I'm imagining in case something really bad happens, the resulting thing might be that we want to look at it before.
So I also promised to talk a little bit about the residency requirement.
Before we move
Oh,
on to
sorry.
that one, I need to tell you something that, while there's a public, you know, camera now on this recording and there's one at the city council, there is the fact that most of life happens outside the camera, of the cameras in which they see us talking here. And for me, one thing that did happen in between was that at the city council meeting before this one, in which this, you know, moving forward, I felt the need to go and be available to make comments, because otherwise we were not on that agenda except for, you know, the results of our meeting. And the thing that I especially felt sensitive about was that we did not vote. There is no procedure for us to vote to support, even for the guidelines. No, we participated in the guidelines, but we did not approve the guidelines in that sense, because the guidelines were from, you know, internal police policy. And then when it goes to city council, there is no such thing as them receiving a recommendation from us. Why? Because we didn't vote, right? And so on the record, and at the last meeting, we had a little moment in which we were trying to figure out, is there a motion for us to approve No, we did not vote. And so I felt especially sensitive to our presence being used to say that we approved of the use of tasers. I think that our participation, at least mine in the subcommittee, was very much for, in the case that tasers are approved, then we should have some guidelines for their use. You know, it's a subtle distinction, but for me it was big because we did not approve the use of tasers. We helped in the guidelines in case they did approve it, and that's a city council matter. So as I went, and I ended up to be a bigger contribution than I expected because they had a bunch of questions. I ended up representing us. You know, you had sent the email, but I didn't feel like I could represent you well enough. I tried to speak for me, not for the board, just from what I saw in the committee. But last detail on that, and I think it should come out, is then I was interviewed by one of the stations. And of course, as it often happens when you speak beyond, they kind of misquoted me. You know, and I felt horrible because we're here to inform the public, not to misinform. And it just became a really big thing for me. And so at the last council meeting, I thought, if I go, there was a reporter already told me, could you show up early and I can talk to you? And I'm like, it's not that I don't want to inform, but I don't want to misinform. You know, that's worse. So I know we don't necessarily have guidelines. I didn't have to call Tom to speak to them. There was a little bit of one-on-one that happened in the discussion, but I guess I just want to say that it's hard to put out the information, at least the one that happens in committee, and we're regular people trying to clarify, and I appreciate that somebody comes and asks a question or gives a comment, because otherwise, it's a very small time of interaction over hours of putting commas and safeguards. That's my spiel. Thank you for listening.
Well, I guess my point that I would make is just that, if there were strong feelings in terms of the work that you had done as a subcommittee, I think we have people on this board who would have made that very clear. And I think that we worked through that, and certainly appreciate the work that the two of you did along that, and really felt pretty comfortable that if you were working on it, it was probably going to head in the direction that the board wanted it to go. So I think I have a relatively high comfort level when you two said you were going to take it over and bring it in, and if there were strong objections, people certainly had the opportunity to indicate that if they felt that they were uncomfortable with that.
Okay.
So that's what we do here.
So there's two issues, and one is approval of the work that you did, or in other words, the guidelines. And I think I agree with Tom that it was a kind of a consensus. The other question is, and we talked about this last time, is it within our purview to approve use of tasers or not? And I think I felt that it isn't. If the decision is made to use them, it's the city council, and we're here to make sure that they're not misused, that if they're used, there's no issues, and to review the use of them, and if we find that there was misuse, then to speak up about it and to follow through on it.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean we don't have opinions about their use or their purchasing, but in this group, we don't have that authority. We don't have a vote on that, so.
Right.
All right. Thank you for indulging.
Okay. All right, you want to talk about the residency thing?
Sure. I think it was 3 weeks ago, the mayor submitted language amending the residency requirement for membership on the board. Currently, as you know, membership is limited to individuals who currently reside within the city limits of Urbana. The amendment would have allowed the mayor to select individuals who either reside in or have resided in the city of Urbana. After some discussion, the city council it was pretty clear that the city council would not have forwarded it on, the committee of the whole would not have forwarded to the city council for final passage upon hearing that the mayor withdrew the amendment. I just wanted to sort of clarify, because there have been several things that have been said about it, and I think it's worth clarifying. First of all, I think it would be inappropriate to mention individuals by name on air in terms of the individuals who may or may not have been affected by that amendment. Once people are off the board, they're private again. They're private people, and I want to respect that. But what I will say is this: I think the motivation that was behind the amendment is that we have people who have had substantial ties to the city of Urbana, who have worked in the school district and worked as pastors for years, and actually may still work as pastors and work in civic organizations with substantial ties that are actually located in Urbana, who happen to live somewhere else. And in those situations, I think the reasoning is that those individuals could contribute substantially to the insight and to the perspective of the board. That is open to debate, and the city council obviously considered it and disagreed, and it was ultimately withdrawn. But I wanted to sort of clarify that there's nothing nefarious about it, nothing suspect about it. It's just an idea. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
I do want to comment on that. One, I think that the harder part for me was that it was on Sunday that I learned about it, that it was going to be on the table on Monday. And that was because I didn't see it published until then. We don't have a say on who belongs to this board. We are all appointed, but it would seem even a courtesy to let us in. Secondly, I may have choice over my name use or not when I'm around, but in that case, the name was brought up of a very respectable person that motivated things, that would have been an asset, definitely, and continued use. But it was the mayor that used the name at City Council under the camera. It just surprised me that if any one of us would have wanted something like that, we wouldn't consult with each other, or at least say something. And I hope that you would expect that also from me. Should anything of that, we don't vote on it, and yet it does affect us. And that's the thing that grabbed me at the announcement. Ultimately, I just, like so many people in the city council, these things affect us, and we have wonderful people that we should include in whichever way we can, but we don't have that vote. It's not in our little rules.
So where are we at with that right now? Has that been withdrawn?
Yes, it's been withdrawn.
Okay, so
There-
that's not a,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gone.
that's not coming
there.
back.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I understand too. And so, I mean, I think the impetus was valiant, but I still think there are a lot of counter arguments to keeping people on the board that actually live inside the city and will really do the grunt work with us, so.
Okay, I want to ask you, Todd, based on your relationship with the city council and the mayor, what charge do we have with this information? I mean, obviously, we have what the ordinance is going to be, and we want to familiarize ourselves and what our responsibilities are going to be, but what is our charge on this particular piece of business?
I think the charge is to rather quickly review the information, determine whether or not there are any gaps that need to be filled via administrative rules, by administrative rules, and then basically develop those administrative rules so that when this begins to occur, we're sort of ready and set to apply good due process procedure to these reviews. So I think the real charge at this point is to become very familiar with the language of the ordinance and determine whether or not there are any rules that need to be generated in order to facilitate proper administration of the charge in the ordinance.
I have a question.
Kind of a dumb one. The underlines are additions?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Now, it went through several iterations, so they may be additions to the final draft as opposed to, but I think they're just additions, period.
Does anyone else have any other questions about what we're doing with this or where we're at with that? Do we have a hard deadline there or even a soft deadline?
To be quite honest with you, if we could, and I hate to say this, but if we could take a look at these and maybe reconvene the latest 4 weeks with some rules, I think that would probably be a good idea.
Okay.
I'd hate to wait 3 months.
No, I don't, no.
Yeah.
Well, I think we want to have these in place, for a whole host of reasons, but not the least of which is we don't want these things deployed and we're not ready to deal with the ramifications of that. Would you agree with that, or?
I think ideally it would be 2 weeks, but I think 4 weeks, something in there.
Yes, and at the same time, the glacial pace of things means that if somebody were unhappy with the taser use, it happens with the other complaints, and it would probably be what? By the wait times on either side might be 3 to 4 months before it would come up to us. How long does it take before somebody puts in a complaint and comes back?
You know, I would be honest with you, currently, when you look at the times between the actual complaints and the completion of the investigations, they're getting shorter and shorter. So I would not necessarily count on it taking 3 months for the investigation to be completed and it to get back to you if there's an appeal.
But there's a period that they can, you know,
Yes.
they can wait to answer and on each other.
Right, but not necessarily. So, you know, the police department could turn around and complete an investigation in 10 days, and we get an appeal the next day. They have 30 days or 45
Okay.
days in which to actually do it, but it could come earlier. And that's really my, maybe I'm just being a little paranoid, but that's
You wanna
my
do it?
concern.
Ricardo, the other thing that I would point out is, we have the department's taser use policy. I think we may want to familiarize ourselves with that, so that if we have questions, we can bring in the command staff from the department, say, explain
why
this
is
to us a
this?
bit more, and have
Okay.
that knowledge internalized before we do some of the other
Yeah.
things that we have to do.
Good. So there's one part of this that I want to highlight for you, because that was not part of our as we were preparing things. Originally, the intention was to have, when a taser is used, including a deployment, to log it, and then those logs would come to us to review, you know, and we battled over the word periodically, regularly, all that. So as that went up, when it came back to council, it had already gone through legal department, and that was and they made a change that I think just we need to be aware of. From the legal department, as I understand it, every one of those recordings shouldn't go up the line one by one. They said that might pose us they may bring liability, or it would expose the city to something of a legal situation. So they recommended that they wait until 4 of them were accumulated before they came up to us for review. And let me tell you just why I'm concerned and why we should look at it, just to try to work it out in our minds. The use of tasers, and I believe the chief, when he says, is, well, no, we saw as comparing, this is very restrictive. That is, the use of tasers ought to be infrequent because the rules are high to not use them if you don't have to, right? Which means there ought to be few uses because we're making it very hard for them to be used. Therefore, to accumulate 4, it shouldn't be very frequently. You know what you see what I'm saying? So, to me, that's a conundrum. Another one of which one do you lean on? Which side do you lean on? And as the change was made, I'm still digesting it because I'm afraid that the truth is true. That one of the two truths is overrides the other. If the true that we don't use them very often because we're very restrictive, then we don't get to see them for a while because 4 don't accumulate. But if the truth of the fear that some people say is that once in the hands of police, they start being used more often, then we'll get them enforced. But neither truth is a very happy one for us. Right. So anyway, I'm just saying we should look at it and think it through a little bit. I don't know what the solution might be.
Okay. Well, I think that's a question worth asking. And I think that's, as we review this, that may be something else. I guess going along that line, I'm just going to kind of follow up on your question, and that would be, so if an individual board member wants to take a look and see what's going on, can they do that the same way we do with any other case?
That's a good question. I would say this, it depends on the status of the use. Like, for instance, if there's a criminal case that's resulting from the use or an anticipated civil case as a result of the use, I would imagine not. If there is a complaint filed, absolutely. And I think the real gray question is if there's no complaint filed and there's no pending criminal or civil suit, whether or not in those instances there are any, there would be any limitations to a board member being able to see those. And I can't answer that. I can't imagine that there would be any limitation, but I can't I can't answer that. Now, there's a difference between individual board members seeing it and the board, qua board, seeing it as a board. Because once it's brought to the board, that's different. You know, it becomes part of the board's records. And I think that was the main concern, and that's why you put them together as fours.
I think we need to work on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should.
I think we need to work on that a little bit. I'm not real happy with that answer. Not yours.
No, that's fine,
I meant the
Yeah, the
legals.
situation is
I'm not really
possible. We
happy
should
with
think it
legals.
through.
And
And-
I think you make the point very succinctly in saying,
Yeah. But what I will tell you is the real concern is that individual taser uses may constitute treasure trove for plaintiffs' attorneys. And that was if I can paraphrase their concern, that was the concern of our legal division. And they did not want the city to be in a disadvantaged legal position as a result of the review process.
well, I
And-
think,
and-
go ahead, I'm sorry.
And they think that possibility is reduced by only distributing them to us 4 at a time?
Well,
I mean, the logic on that's a little
That way,
sticky
the
for me.
plaintiff attorney can harvest.
Well, yeah, but
Well-
they can get whatever they want anyway, right? I mean, the stuff is
and
going to be public
in
record.
addition to the information, it is the board's evaluation of the information also. So if you're evaluating 4 at a time, you're not evaluating any one particular one, right? If you evaluate a particular one, then that gives me, in that particular instance, that gives me a potential contradictory judgment between the board and the police department on a particular issue rather than looking at a group of 4. And I'm just telling you the reasoning behind it, so.
Yeah.
I think we need to talk about that.
Yeah, I'd like to try to
And
appeal.
would
that.
you all like to invite the city attorney here to discuss it personally? I mean, I mean, he'll do a much better job representing his views than I will.
Yeah, of course, my big concern is that, we buy these things, they're out on the street, and as Ricardo mentioned, I mean, if you look at the stats for a couple of the departments, they don't get over like a dozen a year. So, we may have 3 or 4 displays, and we're rolling through a couple of quarters, and citizens are going to want to know exactly who is reviewing the use of these.
I think we can make the case for your point of view myself. I mean, and I think we ought to go from there. And the other thing is, everyone's done a lot of work in terms of what do they do every place else, okay? I haven't heard anything that every place else says, oh, well, it's 4. 4 is the magic number. And I think we may want to work through
I will
that.
say this, I'm not exactly sure there are review processes other places. So we have the most restrictive use guidelines of any place that we've seen. We also have a civilian police review board. It's one of the only review boards in Illinois, and we are probably the only review board that will be reviewing taser usages under this very restrictive.
And I hope you're
it's
saying
not
that
surprising.
proudly, Todd.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
but it's not surprising that we're not going to find other examples of people grouping them or aggregating the reviews
Right.
because other people just aren't reviewing.
doing it.
Sure, okay.
I have a question.
Okay,
Once again, maybe. We're talking about 2 different reviews here, are we not? We're talking about reviewing any use. That's one function. Another function is if there's a complaint. That's a different kind of a review.
Yes.
And
if-
that's an individual.
Yes, and if there's a
Okay.
complaint, that it's treated like all of the other complaints under the ordinance.
Yeah, that came up in our study too. How is it treated? And we decided, let it be like a regular complaint. The other one that tweaked and I got left with the thought is, so what happens when there is a complaint? There is a section that talks about disciplining for misuse. If a policeman uses it and it's considered improper use, what is the penalty for it? And I have to say, I wanted, if not punishment, something very concrete. This will happen. And I learned, and I changed my mind, when I think it was the chief, not to quote him, but it was, we have plenty of situations in which a police officer needs to be called on by their supervisor, you know, whoever that may be, and then eventually the supervisor may be the chief. So we have procedures when somebody gets out of line, what to do about it. And this, you know, the misuse of a firearm, for example, it, you know, they're going to get, quote, in trouble. They have procedures for that. So this one then got put under that kind of system instead of us specifying, because seriously, what do I know as to what's proper to respond to an officer that didn't follow guidelines? You know, let the chief deal with it because he created a problem. Or the officer might have created a problem for the chief and his department. So that's something that I at first didn't quite want to, but now I see as a wiser recommendation. Let the police handle that part because it is, you know, there are many things that pile up, you know, as an employee that may or may not require somebody to, your supervisor to look at. So
Counseling.
there's one of them.
Counseling. You're awful quiet. You got anything? No? You're just so tired, huh?
Todd wanted to step in with something.
I apologize. I just want to make sure that I was very clear. So if a complaint is filed basically alleging a use of taser, right? Taser abuse or whatever you want to call it. That complaint is treated like all of the other complaints. So it would be investigated by the police department. Then the police department would render a decision. If it were appealed, you all would hear the appeal and you would make a decision in open session. At the close of that investigation, at the close of that administrative process, I don't believe that there would be any reason why that complaint would be treated any differently than any other complaint.
Right.
I don't think it would enjoy any special privilege or be relegated to being a part of one of the four. I'm not absolutely certain about that, but that was my understanding. It would be treated just like any other complaint. So after the administrative process closes, you know, if you FOIA that complaint, then you're going to get the information for that complaint. There will be some redactions, of course, along with the statute or in accordance with the statute, but that would be made available. Does that clear? I just want to make sure I'm very clear what I mean by it's treated by other complaints.
The vote would be available, but not our discussion. In our long history of cases we've treated to that detail, we had one, and it was hard because we needed a little bit more procedures. So and none of that was available to the public. The actual discussion was very much within closed doors.
The deliberations will never be available to the public. They're it's deliberations of a quasi-adjudicative body, and those are not available to the public. Plus, they're about a personnel issue, so by law, they're just not going to be available to the public.
Anyone have anything else?
Well, yeah, I'd like to just mention one other thing. This is in the order of maybe more detail than we need to have right now, but I think it's worth mentioning that as citizens look at the police department website, any kind of policy documents you can find on there, there's nothing available to let you get a perception of what use of force policy in the department is. And one of the things I don't want to leave this conversation without mentioning is that I think the chief is intent upon trying to provide the community with some of that kind of information. But I think it got to be very important to me to continue to try to push him, and I think it's something that we could talk about here if we wanted, on getting some kind of very transparent use of force. I don't know if I'm going to use the word guidelines necessarily, but to give the citizens a ready reference as to what they might expect in terms of use of force by an officer. So that kind of came up when we talked about that, Searles and the chief and I talked a lot about that as we were going through the taser stuff, because the taser is obviously another component in the use of force paradigm, which we don't define at all anyway, at least in terms of community information. So.
Can I ask, if we are to reconvene in 2 or 4 weeks, what happens in the meantime? Are we supposed to individually come up with suggestions when we reconvene, or are we supposed to kind of?
Well, I think what I would suggest is that everyone become very, very familiar with the ordinance and with the language. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask legal to, because they were instrumental in putting this together, to take a look at it and see whether or not they feel that any additional administrative rules are necessary, and if they do, to proffer a draft of those rules so that at least we have something to work off of when we actually come together. That doesn't mean that that those would be adopted, but at least it gives us a framework to work off of, because administrative rules can be kind of, I mean, to come up with them just as lay people may be a little bit more daunting than what we want for volunteers.
Well, I think we just want to, let's take a look, does it pass the smell test? I mean, let's take a look, does it make sense, what we finally got? Yeah, we've done a lot of work and everything, let's look at it, let's review it. What I would ask you to do is send us a reminder in 2 weeks in case it falls between the cracks and we want to know that it's coming up, and we're, kind of remind us, let's do your homework, okay?
So when would we like to reconvene? Would you like it to be in 2 weeks? 4 weeks, just a general sense of the board?
2 weeks is too soon for me. 3 weeks, okay. 4 weeks is fine.
Four
That's fine.
weeks.
Okay. Mr. Rent, just one question on, we are reconvening so we can comment. We don't vote on this. We don't approve of this. What's our bottom line as to what we can do here?
Well, I think the reconvening would be with an actual framework, with an administrative rules framework, so that you all could look at them and basically make modifications and changes, and then perhaps come back in another special meeting and approve them once you've had a chance to make the changes. But that actually will be up to you. If you see the rules and you decide to make the modifications on that night, and, well, I would probably think the best way to do it would be take a look at the rules, do the modifications, then we call another meeting for approval of the modifications.
Besides, if we do the modifications, you can bet legals weren't going to want to review it anyway,
Yeah, that's exactly right.
right?
Yes, sir.
And then, so see, once again, once it goes to legal, then we approve them. We can actually approve the administrative rules. Is that our role?
Yes, they're your administrative.
There are rules.
Yes.
There are
There are
rules
rules.
for us to handle.
Yes.
Right.
That I want to get that, because the last
Yes,
time
sir.
I was so surprised that we don't get to vote, so it's not ours.
No.
This one is ours.
Yes,
This
sir.
is our rules for ourselves when the complaints come in.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
that's cool.
They have to be completely consistent with the ordinance, but in terms of the gaps that the ordinance does not provide procedurally, that will be the administrative rules. That will constitute the rules.
All right.
And these are rules for reviewing a group of cases. Because we already have rules for dealing with appeals.
Yes, in accordance with the ordinance, there will be rules for dealing with the group of 4 cases, yes.
Anything else?
One very last thing, not to extend it.
You
too much,
promise?
but I promise.
Okay.
Happy retirement, Tom.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That's it.
Yes. Thanks, yeah. Well, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I'm only semi-retired. Okay, is there any new business? Announcements?
I have one. As of, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, I've received an appointment as the HR manager for the city of Urbana. So I will be transitioning out of the human relations officer role into the HR manager role over the course of the next several weeks and months as we get another HRO into this position. And I'd like to thank everyone. I've thoroughly enjoyed working with you, and will enjoy working with you through this transition
And we know where to
process.
find you, Todd.
Yes, of
And
course.
congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah, congratulations, Todd.
Graduation too, huh?
Not yet. May. Graduation in May.
Okay.
Call for adjournment?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Hold on, we're not gonna
Sorry.
all in favor yet.
I apologize. Have an administrative request. We need to confirm the individual who seconded the motion to approve the minutes. So do we remember who actually seconded the minutes approval?
I wasn't here, so
I think it was Ivy.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Thank you.
We are adjourned. Thank you.